EQ3 occupies a unique position in Ableton's equalizer lineup. It's not designed for surgical mixing or subtle tonal adjustments, but for dramatic, performance-oriented frequency manipulation. Think of it as the EQ section from a professional DJ mixer transplanted directly into your DAW. Where EQ8 gives you 8 bands of precision control and Channel EQ offers console-style tone shaping, EQ3 gives you 3 frequency bands with kill switches, designed for moments when you need to completely remove the bass for a breakdown, cut the highs for a filter sweep effect, or isolate the mids to create a telephone vocal sound. This design philosophy descends directly from DJ mixer heritage, where the ability to instantly kill a frequency band isn't a creative flourish, it's a fundamental performance technique. When you're mixing 2 tracks live and need to swap the bass from one to the other on a downbeat, you don't want to reach for a parametric EQ with 8 bands and adjustable Q values. You want one knob that controls the low end and a button that kills it instantly. That's exactly what EQ3 provides. Understanding this context shapes how you should approach the device. EQ3 is a performance tool first and a mixing tool second, or perhaps not a mixing tool at all in the traditional sense. If you're trying to clean up a muddy vocal or surgically remove a resonant frequency, you're reaching for the wrong device. But if you want to create tension by stripping away the low end before a drop, or automate dramatic filter sweeps across your arrangement, EQ3 becomes indispensable. One important characteristic to understand, EQ3 colors the signal even at default settings due to its analog mixer circuit modeling. This isn't a transparent clinical processor. It's designed to sound like a DJ mixer, which means it imparts a subtle character to your audio. For situations where you want DJ style control without this coloration, Ableton provides the EQ3 rack found in the Performance and DJ folder, which uses EQ8 internally to achieve similar functionality with greater transparency. The GainLo knob controls the level of your low frequency band, with 0 decibels representing unity gain, no boost or cut, turn it down to reduce bass content, turn it up to boost, though boosting is far less common with this device. At its minimum position, GainLo effectively kills the low end entirely, which is the primary way most producers use this control. In practice, you'll typically use GainLo in one of 2 ways, either making gradual reductions to thin out the low end during transitions, or cutting it completely for dramatic effect. The bass drop technique, killing the low end for several bars and then bringing it back on a downbeat, remains one of the most effective tension building tools in electronic music production, and GainLo makes this trivially easy. GainMid controls the middle frequency band, which contains the body of most sounds, vocals, synth leads, guitar fundamentals, and the attack portions of drums. Killing the mids creates a distinctive hollow lo-fi effect that can work beautifully for transitions or creative sound design. Boosting mids pushes sounds forward in the mix, though this tends to sound harsh quickly given EQ3's broad band design. The mid band becomes particularly useful for creating telephone or radio effects when combined with the other bands. By killing the lows and highs while leaving only the mids, you can simulate the frequency response of a telephone speaker or AM radio, a classic production technique that remains effective across genres. GainHi controls the high frequency band, the air, brilliance, and presence of your sounds. Kill it for an instant underwater or through a wall effect. Boost it for added presence. Though use restraint here as boosting highs with EQ3's broad bands can quickly become harsh and fatiguing. Automating GainHi creates some of the most recognizable build-up effects in electronic music. Gradually reducing the highs over 4 or 8 bars, then snapping them back to unity on the drop, creates a satisfying sense of release that listeners respond to instinctively. This works because our ears associate high-frequency content with proximity and energy. Removing it creates psychological distance, and restoring it brings everything crashing back. FreqLo sets the crossover point between your low and mid bands, with a range of 32 Hz to 1.6 kHz and a default around 250 Hz. This parameter fundamentally changes what the GainLo knob affects. At lower settings around 60 to 80 Hz, only sub-bass content falls under GainLo's control. At higher settings, 400 Hz and above, you're including significant bass and low-mid content in the low band. The default 250 Hz setting works well for most DJ-style applications, capturing the fundamental frequencies of bass instruments and kick drums while leaving low-mid content in the mid-band. However, adjusting FreqLo can dramatically change EQ3's character. Setting it very low, 60 to 80 Hz, lets you kill only the sub-bass while preserving the punch of kick drums. Setting it higher, 400 to 600 Hz, creates more dramatic dramatic low cuts that thin out the entire bottom end of a mix. FreqHi sets the crossover point between your mid and high bands, ranging from 1 kHz to 22 kHz with a default around 2.5 kHz. Like FreqLo, this parameter determines what content falls under GainHi's control. Lower FreqHi settings, around 1.5 to 2 kHz, mean GainHi affects more presence and upper mid content, creating more dramatic high cuts. Higher settings, 6 to 10 kHz, limit GainHi to only the airiest frequencies, cymbals, vocal breathiness, and the sparkle of synths. The default 2.45 kHz strikes a reasonable balance for general use, but experimenting with this parameter reveals how much it shapes EQ3's character. Each band features a dedicated kill switch, the L, M, and H buttons that completely remove that frequency band when disengaged. These are functionally equivalent to turning the corresponding gain knob all the way down, but they're instant rather than gradual. This distinction matters enormously in live performance, where you need immediate, dramatic changes without reaching for a knob and turning it smoothly. Kill switches are the heart of EQ3's performance-oriented design. Map them to pads on a MIDI controller, and you can play frequency content like an instrument, killing the bass on beat 1, bringing it back on beat 3, killing the highs for 2 bars, and so on. This real-time manipulation of frequency content is what separates DJ-style mixing from traditional studio mixing. The 24-48 toggle switches the filter slope between 24 decibels octave and 48 decibels octave. This determines how sharply the bands separate from each other, how quickly the filters attenuate frequencies outside their designated range. At 48 decibels octave, you get steeper slopes with more dramatic separation between bands. When you kill the bass at this setting, it really kills the bass. There's minimal bleed from frequencies near the crossover point. This creates the obvious DJ filter sound that's become a production staple. At 24 decibels octave, the slopes are gentler with more overlap between bands. Killing the bass still reduces low-end content significantly, but some low-frequency energy bleeds through, creating more natural-sounding transitions. For dramatic performance effects, 48 decibels typically works better. For more subtle frequency manipulation, or when you want band changes to feel less abrupt, 24 decibels offers a gentler alternative. Many producers keep it at 48 decibels by default, switching to 24 decibels only when the steeper slopes feel too aggressive for a particular context. EQ3's most natural application is real-time frequency manipulation during performance or arrangement. Map the 3 gain knobs to physical knobs on a MIDI controller, and you can mix tracks DJ style, swapping bass between elements, creating filter sweeps, and building tension through frequency manipulation. This transforms EQ3 from a static processor into a performance instrument. The classic bass swap technique translates directly to EQ3. When transitioning between 2 sections or tracks, gradually reduce the bass on the outgoing element while bringing up the bass on the incoming element. The crossover point where both have reduced bass creates a natural tension that resolves when the new element's bass reaches full level. Automating EQ3's parameters creates some of the most effective arrangement techniques in electronic music. The fundamental pattern: remove frequency content to create tension, then restore it for release. This works with any band, but bass and highs produce the most dramatic results. For a classic breakdown, automate GainLo to minimum or engage the L kill switch at the start of your breakdown section. The absence of bass creates anticipation. Listeners know something is coming. When you restore the bass on the drop, the impact is significantly greater than if the bass had been present throughout. This technique works because it exploits contrast. We perceive the bass as more powerful when it returns because we've experienced its absence. High-frequency sweeps work similarly, but create a different emotional effect. Gradually automating GainHi from 0 decibels to minimum over 4 or 8 bars creates the sensation of the music receding or going underwater. Snapping it back to 0 decibels on the drop brings everything back into focus. Combined with bass manipulation, this creates the layered buildups that define contemporary electronic music production. Beyond performance, EQ3 excels at creative frequency isolation effects. The telephone or radio effect, killing lows and highs to leave only mids, simulates the limited frequency response of old communication devices. This works particularly well on vocals for intro sections, breakdowns, or creative contrast within a track. To create this effect, engage the L and H kill switches, or turn GainLo and GainHi to minimum while leaving GainMid at unity. Adjust FreqLo and FreqHi to taste. Higher FreqLo and lower FreqHi settings create a narrower, more extreme telephone effect, while more moderate crossover settings produce a subtler lo-fi character. Automating the crossover frequencies, FreqLo and FreqHi, rather than the gain controls, creates evolving filter effects that differ from traditional filter sweeps. As you move FreqLo upward, more content shifts from the low band to the mid band. If GainLo is reduced, this progressively thins out the low end in a way that feels different from a simple high-pass filter. Similarly, moving FreqHi creates shifting relationships between mid and high content. These crossover automations work particularly well when combined with gain automation, creating complex frequency movements that can't be achieved with simpler EQ tools. Think of the crossover points as movable boundaries that reshape how your three gain controls interact with the frequency spectrum. Create a simple 8-bar loop containing drums, bass, and a synth or pad element. This should be a complete sounding loop that you'd be happy with as a drop or chorus section. Add EQ3 to the master channel or a group bus containing all elements. Set EQ3 to 48 decibels mode for maximum impact. At bar 1, engage the L kill switch or automate GainLo to minimum. Listen to how the loop transforms. Notice how the energy drops immediately and how the remaining elements feel thinner and less grounded. At bar 3, disengage the L kill switch or return gain low to 0 decibels, precisely on the downbeat. Feel the impact of the bass returning. Practice this timing until the bass drop lands exactly on the beat. The precision matters enormously for the effect's impact. Reset EQ3 to default settings. Create an automation lane for GainHi. Starting at bar 1 with GainHi at 0 decibels, draw an automation curve that gradually reduces GainHi to minimum over bars 1 through 4. At bar 5, snap GainHi back to 0 decibels instantly. Listen to how the gradual high-frequency reduction creates anticipation and how the sudden restoration creates release. Experiment with the curve shape. Linear reductions feel different from exponential curves. Repeat the bass drop exercise from part 1, but this time toggle between 24 decibels and 48 decibels modes. Listen carefully to the difference. At 48 decibels, the bass kill is more complete and dramatic. When it's gone, it's really gone. At 24 decibels, some low frequency content bleeds through, creating a less absolute but potentially more natural sounding effect. Neither is objectively better. They serve different purposes. The 48 decibels setting works better for dramatic drops, while 24 decibels can feel more appropriate for subtler transitions. Map all 3 gain knobs to physical knobs on your MIDI controller. If you don't have a controller with 3 knobs, map the kill switches to pads or buttons instead. Now practice playing the EQ in real time as your loop plays. Try killing the bass for 2 beats, bringing it back, sweeping the highs down and up, isolating the mids momentarily. The goal is to develop an intuitive feel for how frequency manipulation affects energy and tension. This is a skill that improves with practice, and professional DJs spend years developing their EQ instincts. This is the most common mistake, reaching for EQ3 when you need to clean up a muddy vocal or remove a problematic resonance. EQ3 isn't designed for this work. Its broad bands and fixed crossover architecture make surgical adjustments impossible. If you're trying to cut 3 decibels at 400 Hz with a narrow Q to reduce boxiness, you need channel EQ or EQ8, not EQ3. Save EQ3 for dramatic performance-oriented moves where precision doesn't matter because you're removing entire frequency ranges, not sculpting specific frequencies. Many producers leave FreqLo and FreqHi at their defaults without considering how these settings shape the device's behavior. Adjusting FreqLo from 250 Hz to 500 Hz dramatically changes what the GainLo knob affects. Suddenly you're controlling not just bass, but significant low-mid content. Before using EQ3 in a performance or arrangement context, take a moment to consider whether the default crossover points serve your needs or whether adjustments would give you more appropriate control over your frequency ranges. EQ3 is fundamentally a subtractive tool. It's designed for removing frequency content, not adding it. While you can boost with the gain controls, doing so often sounds harsh because of the broadband design. There's no Q control to shape your boosts, and the analog modeled circuits can add unwanted coloration when pushed into boost territory. If you need to add presence or weight to a sound, reach for channel EQ or EQ8. Use EQ3 for kills and cuts, not boosts. Killing frequency bands makes things quieter, that's physics, not a quality judgment. When you engage the L kill switch and the loop suddenly sounds worse, part of what you're hearing is simply reduced volume. Our ears perceive louder as better, so any reduction in level can be mistaken for reduction in quality. When evaluating EQ3's effect on your material, compensate for level changes by adjusting your monitoring volume or using a utility device after EQ3 to match levels. This ensures you're evaluating the tonal change, not just the volume change. Kill switches are dramatic by design. They're meant for moments of high impact, not constant use. If you're killing and restoring frequencies every few bars throughout an entire arrangement, the effect loses its power. The bass drop works because it's a moment of contrast. If the bass is constantly appearing and disappearing, there's no contrast to exploit. Use kill switches strategically, saving them for moments where dramatic frequency manipulation serves the arrangement rather than becoming a repetitive gimmick. The choice between EQ3, channel EQ, and EQ8 comes down to intent and context. Choose EQ3 when you need real-time dramatic frequency control during performance, you're creating DJ-style transitions between sections or tracks, you want to automate frequency kills for breakdowns and drops, you're creating telephone, radio, or other frequency isolation effects, you want instant kill switch functionality for live performance, and the DJ mixer coloration suits your aesthetic. Choose channel EQ when you need quick musical tone shaping without deep parameter diving. You're doing first pass mixing and want to make broad tonal decisions. You need a high pass filter plus simple shelves and a parametric mid, and speed and simplicity matter more than surgical precision. Choose EQ8 when you need surgical precision with multiple bands and adjustable Q. You're doing detailed corrective work such as removing resonances and cleaning up recordings. You need mid-side processing or other advanced routing options. You want visual feedback and spectrum analysis, and transparency matters more than character. The key insight is that these aren't competing tools. They're complementary tools designed for different jobs. A single project might use all three. EQ8 for surgical cleanup on individual tracks, channel EQ for quick tone shaping across multiple elements, and EQ3 for dramatic performance effects and automated breakdowns. Choosing the right tool for each job makes your workflow faster and your results better.